All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Side Retired. I'm your host, Stratton J. Davis. Today, we're doing something a little different. Instead of talking to a former major leaguer, we're going to talk to a buddy of mine and another good baseball mind, my friend Daniel Evanson of the Baseball Replay Journal. Daniel, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much. I've been real excited to talk to you because I know it's going to be a lot more of a conversation rather than just an interview. But I've also been real excited to learn more about the replays, baseball replays.
Yeah.
I've always known about replays. I've never done it. I don't know anything about them. I think that's maybe why I find your videos so interesting. So I just wanted to ask first, how did you get into replays and basically what are they?
Yeah. So I'll start. I guess I'll start sort of with like how I got into this. I can blame my father. So I don't know. Maybe my dad will watch this. Maybe he won't. But it's really when I was about like 6 or 7 years old. My dad used to play APBA baseball a lot. That's an old card and dice game that was a baseball simulation that was probably at the height of its popularity, like in the 70s and stuff. My dad used to play that when he was a teenager, and he kept playing off and on until this would have been in like the early 90s. And so I would catch him like in his office playing this game, this dice game with, cards that represented players. And I was a big baseball fan, and I was interested in like math. I mean, I was like 6 years old, and I bugged him a lot about it until he taught me how to play. And so I used to play all the time back when I was a kid. I kind of grew up with that sort of thing. So that's sort of like the baseball, like tabletop simulation type world and stuff. A lot of people play stuff like Stratomatic as well. That's probably a little bit better known these days than APBA. There's a bunch of other games out there. Now, the replay concept goes sort of like a step further than that. This is where you're so interested in playing this that, you're going to go through and like play through a full baseball season and try to see what happens, in your game, see which teams end up on top, see how certain players play. You can sort of think of it as like, I don't know, like a proof of method or something like that for some of these games, see what happens is in this season is, I don't know, is George Brett going to hit 390 again if you play 1980, or is he going to like not hit that well, or is he going to hit like 420 or something like that? And anyway, that's kind of like the mindset that goes into it. Now, the part where replays really becomes interesting is that if you try it and you start playing it, you start realizing that you might be thinking about the big names, but you spend most of your time looking at players you've never heard of and people who are a lot more obscure. And so when you start doing research into that and you start figuring out about some of these ball players that a lot of people have never heard of, that's when it starts really getting into you. And that's when you get into sort of the real replay culture and replay feeling. That's where it becomes a lot of fun. Anyway, so I've been interested in this since I was a little kid. It's kind of like a natural part of me. So I don't know if it's a sickness or what, but it's something that I have a natural inclination towards.
So I know you talk a lot about how you wish other replayers, going back to like talking about, seeing what George Brett would do and all that. You wish that replayers would share more of like the cool things or I guess abnormalities that happen in their replays. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, what are some cool things that have happened in your replays, or what's something that shocked you in your time doing these?
So the most shocking thing that I remember is I have to look up the stats. Anyway, you guys can look it up on your own. But I've kind of put it on the shelf for now. I was doing this replay of the 1949 baseball season, and Ralph Branca, who's famous for being the guy who gave up the home run to Bobby Thompson in 1951. Ralph Branca ended up hitting like 3 or 4 home runs in less than half a season or something in this replay, which is crazy because he had like 1 or 2 in real life. I think he had 2 that season, and that was all he ever hit. Anyways, you get stuff like that happens. It depends on like the way the game is structured and stuff. That was with Diamond Mine Baseball, which is a PC-based game. So you'll get crazy stuff like that happens from time to time. It just sort of depends on like which game engine you use, and what exactly how exactly the engine is sort of constructed. There are games that try to prevent like things that didn't happen in real life from happening. So like if you play Stratomatic, you use the most advanced rules, it will prevent somebody who never hit a home run from hitting a home run like accidentally in the game. there are other games that will sort of allow it to happen, and like weird stuff will happen and stuff like that. So, and then you'll find, games or instances where the guys have the wrong cards. So with APBA, there's a real early version of the 1927 Yankees where Lou Gehrig's card is like insanely good. He'll hit like 500 or something like that if you use it. Anyway, it's pretty cool. So that's part of the fun. A lot of those of us who get really into this replay scene get really sort of, I don't know, we get really particular about history, and we want things to be what we consider to be accurate. But at the same time, sometimes it's fun if just like some weird stuff happens and you have like a weird story to tell about some bizarre thing that happened, So yeah, it's pretty cool.
So was it the replays that got you pretty hardcore into baseball history?
It's a little bit of both, right? So at the same time that I was into that, I was heavy into like collecting baseball cards and was really fascinated with that. I used to watch my parents had a couple of old baseball games. I mean, not really that old at the time, but they had stuff on VHS. So like I would watch like these World Series games from the 80s when I was like 5 or 6 and watch it over and over again. My dad had a video that was the history of baseball that Major League Baseball put out in 1987. So I watched that so many times that the video actually broke because I wore down the tape. My mom had to use Scotch tape to like put it back together and stuff. So it was kind of both, right? Like my interest in, playing these games and doing replays and stuff also fed into this interest in baseball history that I was developing. And it's kind of gone like back and forth like that for like my whole life. And then, then I played a bunch of Nintendo baseball too. So you get all sorts of stuff.
You talking about the videotape reminded me actually one of the first things that got me into sports history in general. I remember my dad got me a videotape, and I think it was from 1987. And it was the top 50 basketball players of all time. Now, It's funny because I grew up watching that tape over and over again, but it was the top 50 list from 1987. So there were dudes on that list that we don't talk about anymore and anything, but I grew up thinking these guys in my head, like Ralph Sampson. That's one guy that was in that list.
Ralph Sampson.
I grew up thinking he was like in Shaq's area, because Shaquille O'Neal wasn't even mentioned in this video. He wasn't even at LSU yet. But because I watched that tape so many damn times, it kind of warped my view of basketball history going in. And I thought like guys like Kiki Vandeweghe, that's another guy that was on the tape. I thought he was way better than he actually was because of that tape. And that's something that, like, a lot of people wouldn't get it whenever I tell them that. So I'm happy I get to share that with you, because that is a funny memory I have.
Those are great names, especially Ralph Sampson, right? I mean, the Rockets would have never gone to the finals in '86 if it wasn't for the Twin Towers. That sounds perfectly fine to me. Yeah.
Hey, he played for my Kings later on too. So, well then, I know you just mentioned the baseball cards. So I want to talk about that real quick. Do you remember the first pack of cards you ever got?
No, and it's because I was too young. I don't know what exactly it was. What I do know from my card collection, which is I think still in my parents' house, is I had this box of KB Toys Young Superstars. So what happened back in the day, I mentioned this in one of these videos that I made a little while ago. What happened back then is Topps would have these agreements with different companies to put out cards underneath like their label, and sometimes they were copies of the official Topps cards, sometimes they were like different. And so they made up this agreement with KB Toys before the '86 season to make this set for the young superstars of baseball. They packaged it together, sold it for like $2 or $3, anyway, my dad, I guess, bought it and gave it to me. I don't think I was even 2 years old yet. And so what did I do? I ate half the cards, and I bent up the other ones and all this stuff. But I know that those were the oldest cards that I had in my collection. So I'm pretty sure that's what it was. I don't know what my feeling was when I got it, but I can remember when I was 4 years old or so. I can remember having packs of cards, getting stuff for my birthday or something, and sorting them out and then unsorting them and resorting them and all that stuff. So it's sort of a natural type thing, I guess.
Do you still get a pack of cards here and there?
I haven't done it for a while. The last time I was heavy into it was probably it was probably around 2010, 2011 or something like that. So it's been a little while. I've been tempted from time to time, but I fear the wrath of my wife. So I haven't done a whole lot of that lately. I do have a couple sets here that I bought maybe a couple years ago of basketball cards. I've got stuff from 92, 93. So I've got like Upper Deck and Fleer Ultra and stuff, just cards that I thought were cool when I was a kid. But it's been a little while. If I do too much of that, my wife's going to get me. So.
Oh, sorry, we got a lot of loud motors around here.
Sorry.
We got a lot of loud motors around here. I don't know if you can hear that or not. We got bikes going down the street all the time.
Yeah, no, I couldn't hear it, so it's fine.
Okay, cool. So that does work. Yeah, the sound muffles on here. I love that. Do you have because I'd like, so you've been going through the sets on your channel. I started with 81, 82, and then the last one you did was 83. Do you have a favorite set? Do you have a set that like sticks out with you the most, or like gives you the best nostalgic feeling?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's why I'm sort of thinking about this. I want to make sure I don't like, say something silly or something like that. But so I can tell you the set that gives me the most like creepy feeling. That's probably 1990 Topps. So when I was a kid in 1990, I remember going to the grocery store with my mom. We used to walk to the store where we used to live back then, and they had those cards. I think it was normally 50 cents a pack, but sometimes they'd have it on sale for 25 cents a pack. So I would get a whole bunch with my allowance. So I had tons of 1990 Topps cards to the point where I just totally despise this set. I think it looks absolutely ugly. So I'm not a huge fan of that one. My favorite baseball set probably is, I think it's probably 1994 Topps, actually. I don't have a whole lot of those. I didn't have a lot of those growing up, but I always liked the design of that. If you go back to like the 80s, I like 1983 Topps a lot. I think I talked about it in the video, or also like 1985 Donruss. And then, of course, everyone likes 1989 Upper Deck, sort of sets like that. So I don't know. There's a lot of really cool sets out there. And then there's a lot of sets, that nobody talks about. I mentioned in one of those videos in 1976, there's that SSPC set that looks really nice. That's, mostly just like high quality photos of players and stuff. If you look at like all-time baseball card sets, and you have to talk about like 1953 Bowman Color or 52 Topps or like T206 and stuff like that. I don't have any money to get any of that stuff, so I don't have any of that. But I like looking at it.
The 1994 Topps, is that the one where their name is in gold on the bottom and it's like a white frame around the portrait?
Yeah. So it's like a white frame. Yeah.
One of the coolest cards that I've ever seen, and I actually I'll pull it out for you if I knew where it was right now. I have it drawn. An artist drew it for me some years ago for free, and he just sent it to me on Twitter because we talked a lot about baseball on there. But one of my favorite cards comes from that set. It's the 1994 Topps Paul O'Neill. And what's cool about it is check it out. He's batting in it, and there's people holding up banners in the back that say his name O'Neill, but the O is like a target for him to hit towards it. I always thought that was super cool. I guess I don't have many from the 94 set as well. I do have to disagree with you on the 90 set, though. I think that's a very
Oh, I think you froze.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I think you froze.
Cool. Just making sure. My first set that I hand collated myself was 1984, and I loved that set for the longest time. But then, for whatever reason, like I now have that same set here, and I look at it maybe once a week. I don't know why. I get some of them I send out to get signed. And every time I look at it, that set gets uglier and uglier to me. I guess my favorite set would have to be the 87 Topps with the wood grain borders.
Yeah.
Because I just remember, for whatever reason, wherever my dad and I would be on any trip, like I remember being in Fredericksburg, Texas, and then we went into like a tool store, and this tool shop had packs of 88 or 87 Topps on sale, and that was the first pack of cards I ever got. and or the first pack of baseball cards at least.
Yeah.
And I can remember the first dude I pulled was Gene Garber on the
Gene
break.
Garber.
Yeah. And I took it. I remember I took it to some it was like a Bible camp thing or something, and I lost it, and I was so upset. But my first set of cards now, I remember how I got into cards in general was I was in kindergarten, and a kid in the class brought his Michael Jordan card for show and tell, and for whatever reason, I was just like, I gotta have that. Like, that's cool. Like, so I thought if you go to the store and you get a box of cards, you're just gonna get that Michael Jordan card in there. Like, I thought that's how it worked. I didn't know anything about it. So I just asked my mom, I was like, hey, can you get me a box of those basketball cards? I'm probably like 5. And so she gets me a box of the cards, and I went home and I opened it. And I still have those cards too. I got a rookie Darren Williams and a rookie Chris Paul from those.
Nice.
But and they did have Michael Jordan cards, but it was like the insert cards. I think they were called MJ profiles. It had been NBA hoops, 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
But I loved those cards, and it got me. I was addicted after that, and now I have way too many cards.
That's just like so many of us. That's a common classic story. Well, if you like 87 Topps, though, I can assure you that there's more than enough 1987 Topps cards out there to last a lifetime.
Yeah, no, I don't have to worry about those. Yeah.
I used to have boxes of it. I think I sold a bunch of it at some point in time or something like that. But yeah, there's so much 87 Topps out there. It's not even funny. It's just crazy how many cards they printed. But you know, it's all good. It was their marketing strategy, so whatever.
The only thing I wish I had done was taken better care of my basketball cards growing up, because those ones they did not overprint, and they are worth more these days.
Yeah, so, and that's common. Yeah, especially with basketball. Yeah, basketball has a good market, and then also hockey has a good market too. So yeah.
Well, I didn't realize until watching your videos on your basketball channel that there weren't basketball cards for the longest time, and they would just pop up every once in a while, like the 71-72 set, I believe it is.
Yeah.
I had no clue about that, because I had a few 81 Topps basketball cards as a kid, and I always wanted to find more, but I never could.
Yeah, it's a really kind of strange thing, but yeah, for whatever reason, Topps didn't make a lot of that. And I didn't fully realize that actually until I made that video, right? But it's like you have like a set, and then you wait like 10 years for the next set. It's like really strange, you know, how it worked back then. But and then Topps went along until I think it was 82. And then after that, they just stopped making cards for like 10 years. And then, you know, the license finally went to Fleer and stuff. But yeah, it's kind of weird. I mean, and then that was also during kind of the real bad period of the NBA, you know, the late 70s, early 80s, when there was a lot of like drugs and a lot of stuff that people were talking about. The sport, you know, was kind of suffering and stuff like that. This is the thing. I mean, I know that the NBA has its problems today, but the problems it has today are nothing like the problems they had like in the late 70s. You know, that when you read about that, you're like, man, how did this even like remain a thing, right? It was like really in danger of falling apart. So anyway.
Well, I think the NBA, more so than other leagues, their big problem is today let's bring it back here. You put up that post on your basketball channel the other day about I forgot what it said exactly. Adam Silver having to do something with gambling.
Yeah. What is Commissioner Silver? Yeah, is he too influenced by gamblers? I think that's what it was. I put like a poll. Yeah.
Well, I think yes, he's very influenced by gambling. I know one person commented on there in response to something I said that David Stern was worse about it, and I do agree. I think David Stern was really bad about it. What I think is really bad about the NBA today, and something I notice more and more when I do my own research, I think they have a bad whitewashing problem when it comes to like some of their players and the stuff that they've done in their personal lives. And then other guys, though, like Allen Iverson comes to mind. He made mistakes in his life, but they really don't do anything to kind of, I guess, what's the word? I don't want to say honor him, because that's the wrong word to use. But, you know, today when they talk about the greatest players, Allen Iverson's name's not in there.
Right,
Whereas like
right,
10 years ago, his name would have been in there. And I know
right.
you watched him play. I grew up
Yeah,
watching him play. One of
yeah.
the best to ever do it. But then you have guys like McCall Bridges, who I don't even remember what he did, but I know it was terrible beating a woman. And he's in the NBA scot-free, fine. Nothing
Yeah,
happened
no
to
one
him.
talks, but yeah, no,
And then
absolutely.
and then the other thing too I've come to figure out is like if you look up guys who played in the NFL or MLB in the last 20 years on Wikipedia and they've done bad things, it will pop up on there and it will tell you that. Now, if you do the same with the NBA, like I know, for instance, it may not be the same right now, but in the past, if you looked up Vernon Maxwell, it mentioned none of his arrest.
Interesting.
And if you look up guys like Jared Mustaf, who I knew about for the longest time, but only this last week found out was involved with like a murder scene.
I
And
didn't know that.
yeah, and I think the NBA does a great job of covering up for their players, but I think the NBA's problem today is they exist purely for entertainment.
Yeah, exactly.
And when they have to have these things like the play-in tournament, and you have to have guys like Brian Windhorst going on sports radio and trying to explain why it's a great thing for the sport,
Yeah,
it's too far gone, and it makes me sad because growing up, basketball, I enjoyed it, watching it more than baseball and football, but now I cannot watch it at all.
yeah,
And
it's totally different feel. You know, it's been a little while since I've watched like a regular season game, but yeah, these days it's like a 3-point shooting contest. I don't know if you've ever seen it. There was the highest scoring college game of all time, you know, whatever, from like 30 years ago, I can't remember the two teams down south. I can't remember what it was, but when you watch this game, it's almost unwatchable because it's all 3-pointers or like wide open dunks. But that's what the NBA's turned into. And you're like, why did we turn this league into this? Nobody, I mean, there are some guys who will play defense, but it's like they only do it in the playoffs, And anyway, the other thing I'll say is that I've always felt that Allen Iverson, I mean, he's not a perfect person, but I've always felt he really got the short end of the stick. When I was, in college, I remember, playing basketball with kids and stuff like that. And everybody had like the AI style. Everybody had AI shoes on and stuff like that, and then you don't hear about Iverson anymore. The only thing people talk about is him saying, practice, this is practice we're talking about or whatever, but they forget about, all the stuff he did, so.
Well, and going back to getting the short end of the stick, they don't talk about the context in which he was complaining about practice. His friend, his best friend just died.
Exactly.
And
no one mentions it.
Yeah, so I think the NBA does that to a lot of guys too, though. Yeah. And you don't see that as much in the NFL and MLB, but that leads me to just another question I want to ask you is like, how much, I know we talked before this and you mentioned you don't really keep up with basketball anymore. How much do you keep up with MLB or NFL?
Well, so actually with the NFL, I've kept them probably more with college football, at least this last year. I've been meaning to keep up with the NFL a little bit more, but I haven't done it. My problem is on Sundays, if I sit down to watch it, I usually end up falling asleep, which is really embarrassing. But I watch like, a bootleg stream of like NFL Red Zone or whatever and find myself asleep halfway through. Yeah. But MLB, I haven't kept up as much as I really should. I probably should dive more into it this year and see if I can, finally wake things up. Now that they have the pitch clock and things are a little bit faster, I think it's probably a little bit easier to keep up with. I was really into it probably up until like 2017, 2018, something like that. And then it just got to the point where it was too slow. And I was like, I mean, it's just killing me. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because you said 2017, 2018. I was going to ask if it was the Astros that ruined it for you, because I know.
No, not so much. But yeah, that's another big scandal. Yeah, talk about scandals that they want to put under the rug.
And well, I know you're a Utah Jazz fan, and I know you're a BYU fan. Who do you like in MLB and NFL? If you had to choose.
Yeah, NFL, I don't actually have a favorite team. I would normally say, because we live in Northern Virginia, the Commanders are not too far away, but I haven't followed them really that much. Last time I followed the Commanders was when they were the Redskins and they had RG3 at quarterback. So I like RG3, right?
Yeah, RG3 is cool.
For MLB, so my mom grew up in Seattle, and so I kind of became like a Seattle Mariners fan as a result of that, which is another one of those things where you're like, I think this was sort of forced upon me. I didn't choose this, So, but even there, I haven't followed them as close as I wanted to, you know, despite all the pain of the ALCS last year and all that stuff. So we'll see what this season has to offer. But yeah, for the most part, though, I wind up being a fan of sort of like the sports in general, you know, trying to watch as much as I possibly can. But yeah.
So your video actually on the ALCS, I watched.
Yeah.
Your first video I ever watched was the Jose Canseco card video, and then I don't think I watched your channel for months after that.
Yes, I'm #1 fan.
I remember thinking after I saw your Jose Canseco video, I was like, man, I wish this dude would make more videos about cards. That was good. But then I saw you made that video about bunting, dude. And I watched that ALCS Game 7, and when they went to bunt, I was like, what the hell are they bunting here for?
Yeah, yeah.
And so when your video came out, I was like, all right, all right, this guy gets it. And so were you watching that game live?
No, I wasn't actually. I'm trying to remember why, but yeah, anyway, no, I wasn't. This is the other thing, right? So I most of the stuff I'll watch live, I watch on these bootleg streams. I don't have any television service, like I don't pay money for it. Yeah,
I don't believe you paying for that.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way I am. I didn't grow up paying for it. You know,
no, I was about to say, I tell my wife all the time, growing up, all these games were free.
Yeah,
we got every single game for free, pretty much, and it's crazy now that we have to pay for them.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, for whatever reason, I didn't watch that live. I probably should have, but anyway, it's all right. You can always go back and you know, watch again and and you know, figure it out that way. So yeah.
So that brings me to another thing I want to talk about. When did you start watching old games? Because that was something.
Yeah.
I'll tell you first. I lived in Texas back in 2021, and I just, you know, I had to save every dollar I made at that time. And, you know, I still went out and had fun, but there were a lot of nights I just had to stay in and hang out at the house. And so I started watching on YouTube old Texas Rangers games from the 80s and 90s. And I just decided, like, you know what? I'm going to start doing this every night. And I started watching a game from whatever, the 94 season, 93 season. And that's how I've come to learn more about a lot of these older guys and how they play.
Yeah.
But what got you into doing that? Because I know I've told people I do that, and they can't believe I do that. They think that's such a wild.
Most people think it's insane. So yeah, you know, when I was a kid, you know, my dad had copies of a couple old games from like the 80s on video. I used to watch them all the time. You know, when I was a kid, my parents would joke about it. When I was like 4 years old, like I would put the tape in the old VCR, and I'd fall asleep watching it. You know, that was like my afternoon nap or whatever, watching an old baseball game. And later on, this would have been around like 2000 or so. I found some guy online back in the early days of the internet who was selling VHS copies of old games. And so I bought a couple of stuff from him. I bought like a game from the 69 World Series, and then one of the games from the 1980 NLCS, and then I think one from the 86 NLCS or something like that. And anyway, over time, I started to find where these people were who were selling this stuff, and I would get stuff on DVD, and I built up like a big collection and stuff. And nowadays, you can find all of the stuff that I had, you can find on YouTube. And there's some stuff that's harder to find, but you can still find it if you know where to look, or you can find these guys and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that's kind of how I grew up. It's funny, when I was in college, my freshman year, 2003, I spent the money I didn't spend on books that was supposed to be for books. I spent on eBay buying, you know, videos of old like World Series on, you know, getting that and stuff like that. So, yeah, that was an interesting economic decision on my part.
It's all right. I've made plenty of those too. So. I know, actually, you've talked about you used to collect books. I've spent too much on books myself.
Yeah, well, you can even see behind me. This is, I mean, it's nothing like it used to be. I have a whole bunch of all sorts of books and stuff. You probably can't see clearly, but yeah, that's the way it is.
What's the rarest book you think you own?
Oh boy. So the rarest is probably there's a couple of books here that I had to get from China that are in like Chinese. I have a copy of the Chinese novel Dream of the Red Chamber that's in Chinese and English that was published in Shanghai. This is like 2009 or something that I ordered from some website. So that's probably it, because like I think they sold out or something. I think I paid like $100 for it or something like that. So that's probably about it.
So talk about that real quick, man, because I dug that. You know, I don't read much fiction. I actually read a lot of nonfiction, and I kind of want to push myself to read more fiction. So what is the Dream of the Red Chamber? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
What is it, and why are you so passionate about it that you have a blog dedicated to?
I do.
Like diving deep into this, and I think it's cool, but I haven't read the book myself, so I don't know. Yeah. So what is it, and why are you so?
We're hitting every single possible point. This is great. Yeah, no. So the Dream of the Red Chamber is if you study Chinese, if you study China, it's like the most famous novel in Chinese history. It's interesting. It was written in the middle of the 18th century, right? So we're talking like before the U.S. Constitution, basically. You know, like that time period. But if you read it, you would think that it was written actually relatively recently, right? It's a really sort of modern style novel. And it's covered with all sorts of like poetry and all sorts of interesting stuff. It's kind of like this love story. It's a love triangle that happens, but then there's all of this other stuff that happens as well inside the book. Like, you know, people having like affairs with each other, people, you know, making like bizarre decisions, people spending money like crazy on stuff that they can't afford. And there's all of this like sort of, you know, subtle stories and stuff in there that are like, you know, it's not necessarily like a moralistic book, but there's a lot of commentary you can tell that's like subtle about, you know, the way that people think and sort of the way human nature is. So it's fascinating to me. It's sort of like, you know, this famous Russian novels of the 19th century, except it's before then. It's kind of like Tolstoy before Tolstoy, that sort of thing. And anyway, I read it when we were in China back in 2015, 2016, right around there. I read it in Chinese, and I was reading these two translations in English. And the English translations, I could tell, you know, were kind of sometimes at odds with the Chinese original. And I remember thinking at the time, man, if I had the time, I would just dive into this and, you know, come up with like my own translation and like really geek out over this. And so, you know, about a year ago, I decided, why don't I just do that? So that's kind of how that started, and that's kind of where that comes from. So there's like a lot of other stuff in my life, like I get into it and I get like really deep into it to the point where it's probably scary for other people. So that's the way it is.
I think that's where you and I are alike, because I know my family constantly tells me when I fall in love with something or I get into something, I get way into it.
Yeah.
But I just don't think there's any other way to be, you know, like
exactly.
If you're loving it, if you're enjoying it, of course you're going to want to dive deep.
Yeah. That feels right to me, right? It feels like, yeah, this is interesting. We got to go all the way in. You know, so.
I don't want to leave any stone unturned. Yeah,
exactly.
And so like you started the blog. You were blogging before you started doing any videos, right?
Yeah.
So do you consider yourself more of a writer than you do I guess video journalist?
Boy, that's a good question as well. These days, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not sure. I'd actually be interested to know the people who follow me, what they would consider me to be, whether one or the other. So my dad is a journalist. My dad works for a newspaper, the Deseret News in Utah. He's worked there for decades. And so a lot of sort of the interest in journalism, I think, naturally comes from him and sort of from that side. But, you know, YouTube and stuff like that is something I've sort of stumbled across and decided to experiment with and really became interested in. I like the idea of using like the visual medium to try to like give off similar messages. When I do scripted videos, those can be a little bit harder because you got to, you know, write the script right, figure out what you're going to show at this time and that time and all that other stuff. But at the same time, sometimes it's easier because you can, you know, show what it is you're trying to say instead of trying to describe it like you do through writing. So I don't know. I think that both of them sort of have their place. I'm probably crazy for trying to do both, though. So I don't know.
Well, what I've found is that, like, what I enjoy about writing is like, I guess what's easier with writing is, like I just mentioned, you know, you don't leave any stone unturned.
Yeah.
When you're making a video, oh man, it's easy to forget something. It's easy to Like as I'm sitting here with you, I feel like I'm forgetting a million things I want to ask you and talk to you about. Whereas like if I'm writing it, I could put it all there. It's all fleshed out. And if anyone wants to know my thoughts on it, bam, it's right there.
Yeah.
However, I will say, I guess in regards to writing, one thing that's been discouraging lately is the rise of AI.
Yeah.
And these companies like Washington Post using AI to write their articles and stuff.
Yeah,
and
it's a problem.
It's a problem, and I guess that's pushed me more into wanting to do YouTube, because I started YouTube actually back during the pandemic.
Yep.
I was just bored, and I was real into basketball history at that time. So I think they're still on there, 3 or 4 videos talking about obscure times in players' careers and stuff like that. People liked it, but I just wasn't at the place in my life where I could consistently do that. And so I just kind of put it on the back burner for a long time. But now that I've gotten back into doing YouTube, what you just said is the visual part of it. And I know also you've mentioned in videos too that a lot of people don't even watch the video. They just listen to the person talking. And yeah, it does reach a wider audience. It does get people who wouldn't normally engage with that kind of content to engage with it. And I think that is one thing that has kind of driven myself more towards wanting to pursue YouTube as a hobby.
Yeah. And one thing I go back to as well, which is talking about AI. One of the things I think that the companies that keep pushing this stuff don't understand is that people who consume content really want to have a connection with the person who's making it. This is something I've noticed over and over again. So I'll even tell you, the way that I really got into YouTube, this is good, more geeky stuff, but I've been addicted to the computer game Football Manager, the soccer game, for a long time. And during the pandemic, I was watching this guy from England, Lelujo, who would make these videos every day of him playing this game and talking about it and stuff. And it was really engaging. And I was always thinking, boy, I wish I could do something like that. And that's kind of where I started thinking like along those lines. But the reason why it was so engaging is because it was an actual person. You got to know him, and his personality, and his quirks, and like he always says this silly thing or whatever, and all that stuff. That's what I think people are really looking for even today when it comes to their journalism and all that stuff. That plus the one advantage I think that writing might have over YouTube is that if you really get into sort of the creative side of writing, you can make some really amazing connections and stuff. My favorite is, I made a video on that soccer channel a while back talking about why soccer has never been that popular in the United States. And the reason why is because in like the 1920s, everybody was paying attention here to college football instead of soccer. And part of the reason why is because you had people like Grantland Rice who were writing these articles about, college football and like, Notre Dame. That's where the whole Notre Dame, the Four Horsemen comes from. It was an article that he wrote that was about like the horsemen of the apocalypse, coming up in the backfield and stopping, the other team from running and stuff like that, I mean, like AI can do certain things, but it can't do that. It's that type of creativity that, eventually I think the companies are going to realize that that's missing, but I worry that for a lot of these companies, they're going to end up going under until they finally realize that people are not going to pay money for just this slop and garbage. So, but we'll see how long it takes.
And, well, like I think from your Twitter, aren't you a fan of Cinemassacre?
Yes. Boy, you got everything, man. There's no stone left unturned. You were right.
Sweet. Glad you dig it. Cinemassacre, man. I was a huge fan of theirs growing up. And have you paid attention to like the drama in like the last 5 years?
I actually got banned from the Cinemassacre Truth on Reddit after a while. I don't remember why, but anyway, whatever.
I used to be on Reddit, and I dude, that was my favorite subreddit to keep up with because of all the stuff they pull out constantly. But I guess like talking about the connection with the creator, that was the first time that I felt like with James Rolfe. Like I kind of even fucking excuse my language, but Mike Matei, he's a weirdo. He's a weirdo, but he seems like the kind of guy I would have grown up being friends with.
Oh, absolutely. So I knew kids who were just like him. Like, I'm 100% serious, right? And there are times where, I'm sitting around him having lunch or whatever, like, what am I going to put on? It's too quiet. And so I'll be like, I wonder what Mike's doing. Let me listen to Mike Matei play like some random, NES game and, hit his couch and scream and stuff like that, right? Because you're like, yeah, this is just like back when I was in middle school,
Yeah. And like listening to James Rolfe whenever he's not being the angry video game nerd, I enjoy those videos a lot because
Yeah.
he talks about being a kid and just in his summers, taking out a video camera with his friends and just making these movies. I wasn't exactly like that. I played video games as a kid, but I wasn't so into them, or
Right.
I just more played them for fun. And same thing with like movies. I love movies now. I could watch movies all the time, but for me, it was in the summers growing up, and I didn't have the internet. I didn't have all that, but I had my shoebox full of cards. And let's see, who's this guy? Oh, Shaquille O'Neal. Well, let's go out. I'd ask my cousins, who tell me about Shaquille O'Neal, and they tell me about him, and then I want to go pretend I'm Shaq on the basketball goal for hours. And so I know, like with your videos, I've definitely felt that connection with the creator. Like I enjoy your videos a lot because, like, even though I have no idea what the hell replays are or how to work them, I'm listening to this guy talk about stuff that I at least know, and he's bringing up fun ideas about it. You're talking about it in a way that makes the brain work. Even though I know all this stuff, I'm thinking about it now in a different way. And yeah, AI can't give that to you.
Right.
And so, yeah, I guess now you talking about that gives me a little more hope for the future in regards to that. But I do share your concern that, these companies are going to go under before that happens.
And I will say, in my own defense, I do feel kind of bad about some of the memes that I've written or whatever about James Rolfe and stuff, because when I look back now, I'm like, maybe he's, maybe we should give this guy some slack or something. I don't know. But yeah, I know that there's a lot of drama over at Cinemassacre, and yeah.
My favorite meme from that whole thing is people giving him shit about what he calls films.
Yes. Yeah, Jimmy Rolfe versus Punching Bag, right?
Yeah, dude, that's not a film.
All-time classics, Criterion Collection.
And oh man, it just sucks because that is the first time, I guess, like, my parents would talk about like the Rolling Stones and seeing them come out on stage at their old age and be like, oh my God, just give it up.
Yeah.
James Rolfe is the first person I've watched and been like, dude, just give it up. Retire. Like you've done so much, be done. So that is heartbreaking.
And one of the sad things about that is, he would do things like, Monster Madness and stuff, but then recently he's just sort of, not even going to try. He did like the video on Skittles or whatever it was, like the candy you get at Halloween. It's like, dude.
Well, last I was keeping up with it, he hired someone else to write the scripts for Monster Madness. And that was the last time that was it for me.
Yeah, it's just so sad. It's so sad to see that happen, Anyway.
Well, then another dude on that same level, though, Nostalgia Critic. I used to watch his stuff all the time, and then he just really, to me, just stopped being funny.
Yeah. It's Doug Walker, right?
Yeah, Doug Walker.
Doug Walker, yeah. No, it's sad. It's sad when you see that happen. And anyway, I think some people can sort of keep it up. What I think, at least when it comes to James Rolfe, I think part of his problem with the AVGN was that he wasn't legitimately that into video games. He's more into movies, Right. I think that if you make sure that you're actually passionate about what you're really passionate about, I think you have a better chance than if you're just acting, so yeah.
Well, going back to baseball cards real quick, I just want to ask you this.
Passion.
Do you have a favorite single card in your collection? Do you have one that sticks out the most, or?
Oh man, geez. Oh, I got to think about that. I'm not.
That is tough. Sure. Like I've been thinking about that myself, like every day. I'll show you this.
Yeah, show me what you got, because I might not. Something might come to me all of a sudden, or something like that.
This has been my favorite one I got recently. My wife, real quick, I'll show you this. I got Dave Stewart.
Oh, yes. I think I saw the. Did you post on that about that on Twitter or something like that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
on Facebook. Yeah,
Facebook. That's right. Yeah, that's awesome. I saw that the other day. Yeah,
but
that's
this is
awesome.
my favorite I got recently. I got this for $40.
Oh
Steve
wow,
Carlton autograph, and then 3 of his patches, and that's from the Topps Museum collection. That's got to be the coolest card I've ever owned, in my opinion.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, boy, I can't think of a single card that's like the coolest. I'm gonna have to really like, dig through. Actually, I can tell you that I can tell you my favorite card purchase that I made, that this was years ago, and I ended up not following all the way through, but I bought a Ricky Henderson rookie card on eBay. This was like 15 years ago for probably like $15 or something like that. It wasn't in great condition, but it was like good enough. And I thought, I'm going to do a 1980 top set. I got about 2/3 of the way through, and then I burnt out on it. And I don't know what I ended up doing with the cards in the end. I probably sold them off eventually or something like that. But
Ricky Henderson's another dude actually whose autograph I did get, and that's a cool story too. Because we were talking before this, and I was telling you some of the autographs you got. You mentioned like, oh, those guys didn't know what they had.
Yeah,
I got this one, and it has the certification from JSA and everything. I got it for $20.
That's
when
crazy.
I was 8th grade, me and my dad were going through Odessa, Texas, and we stopped. And it was cool because it came in this case, and it obviously was in like a smoker's house because it was all yellowed. And I think maybe that's why I got it for $20 because the dude thought it was in bad condition. But literally, we went home and my dad took it out of the case, and the card itself was not damaged.
That's amazing.
So he just got a new case for it. And I've had that ever since. That's up there for my favorite cards.
That's
yeah,
awesome. Now,
and
one
it's
thing,
daughter's card. It's not regular size, so that's also cool.
oh, that's also cool. That's interesting. And one thing I will say, after looking at that Topps Museum card that you have, one of the things that the companies have done better in recent years is that they have, like inserts and cool cards and stuff they print out that's actually interesting to look at, as opposed to doing nothing. Because when you go through the history of baseball cards, especially in the 80s, like there'd be these like special sets they come out with that they look like garbage, and you're like, I don't want that card. Who wants to get that? It looks awful, and anyway, they've gotten better over time about like putting in like special patches or, signature or serial stuff or whatever,
I will say the thing that has frustrated me with card collecting lately and just the marketplace for them in general is like, I don't buy new cards. I don't really have the desire for them, but like I have a nephew and he's really into card collecting, and I try to get him into it by like giving him some of my old cards and stuff. But the truth is, like, these aren't the guys he's watching. He's not into them. He's not going to know what the hell Al Toon did because he's not ever going to watch Al Toon play. So I want to get him the new cards, but man, when I was a kid, we could get a pack of cards, and we used to get these boxes from like Big Five, and it had 7 individual different packs from different years. And so you would get different mixes of players and all that. You could get it for $5. Nowadays, if I wanted to get my nephew a pack like that, but with the newer cards, it costs $30 at the least.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you open up the packs and they're not worth it. None of them are worth it.
Yeah.
And I will say, like, I guess I feel like, have you ever watched King of Collectibles on Netflix?
No, I haven't actually. I have to check that out.
I enjoy it. I think you'll enjoy it too, but it follows Golden Auctions and what they do. And
yes,
if you watch that though, it just becomes very clear that card collecting is a rich man's game now.
Yeah.
That does suck for the younger generations that won't know what that feels like to just get a pack of cards after school, go home and flip through them and like, oh wow, now I have a LeBron James. Like, my nephew doesn't get to experience that, and that is something very frustrating. I'm kind of hoping there will be a company like the company you talked about the other day in your 1983 video. I forget the name, but
TCMA.
Yeah, I hope another company like that comes along to produce cheaper cards so that kids can get them and just
Or what I was just about to say, over in the NFL, when ProSet came around in the 89,
Yes.
I think. Yeah, ProSet had the agreement with NFL Properties where basically they wanted to get more kids into collecting football cards because nobody collected them. And so they're like, okay, we're going to make tons of this and we'll make it cheap and we'll make it look good. And that's what they
Yes.
did. That's all you need. I mean, people do care a little bit about, is this card worth much money or not? These days you can make it easily. You just put like a patch on it or make it one of one or give it a different like picture or something like that, right? But you still want kids to collect cards like they used to collect. I mean, that's how kids get interested in the sport. If you don't have the cards, how do you know who the players are?
Exactly. And like the Pro Set cards, especially, me and my little brother collected those. And
Yeah.
it came out in 1990, right?
Yeah.
I was born in 2000. So
yeah,
that came 10 years before I was even born.
Yeah.
And me and my little brother collected those. And that's how we learned about guys like Lawrence Taylor, Barry Sanders. Hell, one of my favorite players that my friends my age don't even know who he is, Joey Browner from the Vikings. Like, that's a guy I loved because I remember getting his cards, and what I learned about him, I liked. So it was through card collecting that I was able to learn more about the history of the game, the players, and appreciate it more. And I think that is lacking today with children, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so anyway, my thing's always been, you want to learn more about the history of the sport, all of the sports, and, try to get people more into them and do the best that we can to try to get people to actually watch the video. That's the other problem, but take it a step at a time.
Yeah. And another thing I just want to talk about real quick, I loved MLB on Fox until I watched your video.
I've ruined it for everyone.
Yeah, you did. You ruined it for me because, like, I grew up watching MLB on Fox, and I still love NFL on Fox. But, yeah, man, I didn't realize that, like, camera angles and all that kept me from seeing so much until I watched your video, and that was very impressive to me because I don't think I had ever even conceptualized in my mind that different broadcasts show you different things.
Yeah, it's and I think the reason why is because as time has gone on, they've tried to like homogenize this. So they'll have it nowadays where, this is where all the cameras go and like people are trained on this is just the way that you do it and stuff. But yeah, no, if you watch, especially if you watch games on NBC from like the 80s and also going back to the 70s, you'll notice that they would have different camera angles. They had different approaches to it, especially if, back when people would bunt, they would like, zoom out a little bit so you could see the fielders and where things were and you could understand the strategy and stuff. Most of that stuff is gone, unfortunately. And I've got to be careful here. I don't want to like commit myself to it too much, but I've been thinking for a while about doing a video on like the history of like the game of the week and how things have changed and stuff. There is a really cool broadcast out there. I remember watching this live from, I think, 2000. There was a Dodgers-Cubs game that Fox did where they did every inning in a different style from a different decade. And so they started off with like what it would have been like to watch from like the earliest baseball broadcast. And then by the end, it was up to 2000. I have a copy of it. You can find it on YouTube. I have to sit down and watch it again. It's been a long time since I've seen it. But it's pretty interesting, though, how things have changed with the technology and all that stuff. But having said that, I really do think that the 80s was the time where you had more people who were like trying to direct the broadcast in a way that made sense to baseball fans. These days, it feels more like they're just so like fascinated with close-ups that nobody's really thinking about like how the sport actually works.
Well, I hadn't even thought of that until I watched your video, and then I thought back on it because one of the first World Series I rewatched was the 2001 World Series.
Oh yeah.
And then I think back on it, and I'm like, holy shit, the camera angles, the close-ups, they were filming it like it was a movie. Mm-hmm. And thank God it unfolded like it was a movie because it kind of fit that series. But then I was thinking later, more so with other series, like, that's like I could imagine. I've never watched the 2005 World Series, but I could imagine if that was on Fox, it probably wasn't very entertaining.
Yeah, that was. I remember watching that one live. Yeah, so no, but that was definitely on Fox. But yeah, if you really want to have fun, go back and watch like the 1986 World Series. The Red Sox Mets, and just pay attention to the camera angles. And also the broadcasting. I mean, it's kind of unfair. I'm going to do a project here. I'm going to listen to a bunch of Vin Scully broadcasts and watch them and just listen to what he does. It's kind of unfair because you're not going to get another Vin Scully no matter how hard you try. But the thing that Vince Scully was so good about was not just telling stories, but also like paying attention to the game that was in front of him. And these days, so much of especially national broadcast is all like, oh, now we have to go talk with the manager. And oh, now we have to do we have to shill for some stupid show that's coming up or, whatever. It's just, it's not the same. It's not like it once was.
Yeah, like the guests in the booth thing. That's annoying. Which, okay, that reminds me. Now, do you know of another YouTube creator, Jaguar Gator 9?
Oh, yes, I know about him. Yeah, I've watched a bunch of his stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, he did a video recently about Jimmy Kimmel getting in the booth on Monday Night Football or something.
I haven't seen that.
Oh, it was bad. It was terrible. And it just made me realize, I didn't realize how long these gimmicks have been going on.
Yeah.
Because broadcasting used to be a separate entity on its own. That used to be something people enjoyed on its own. Like, I know my grandmother enjoyed listening to Marv Albert commentate a basketball game, but she doesn't know a damn thing about basketball.
Yeah.
And and you don't have that anymore.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That is disappointing.
Yeah, it is. It really is. The real famous one was Bob Prince over in Pittsburgh. If you can find, I have a bunch of old radio broadcasts with Bob Prince, but he was great. You listen to him. You could listen to him talk for hours. He had a great deep voice, and he had all sorts of these, country style expressions and stuff like that. He'd always talk about, well, we need to get a bloop and a blast and whatever to get out of this, and so on. And anyway, Bob Prince was awesome. The shame is that the Pirates ended up firing him after 1975, I think it was, for whatever reason, probably because he was, sometimes critical of the team and didn't, always do what they wanted him to do and all that stuff. So anyway, it's a shame, but yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff out there if you dig into it. I should do more videos like that. You're starting to convince me.
So I want to ask you, since you talked about being at BYU, when you were there, was the football team any good?
Not really. No, I was there. It's funny, as I grew up a BYU fan, my dad and I used to have season tickets going back to 1990s. I was 6 years old. That's when they had Ty Detmer won the Heisman Trophy and all that. And so it was Ty Detmer was a Texas guy, wasn't he? Anyway,
yeah. My dad was hunting buddies with Ty Detmer.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah, yeah. Well, just be careful going around with him because his accuracy is not always that great. He had the record for interceptions in the NFL. So, so I go to BYU finally, but it was after LaVell Edwards, the old coach, had finally retired, and they had Gary Crowton there. And the Gary Crowton era did not end very well. BYU was pretty bad during my time there. Especially my freshman year. And that's when they had the big scandals too. There were all these sex scandals that came out, it's BYU. Really? So yeah, any sort of scandal like that was just awful, but we suspect that there was a lot of stuff going on with the football team before that was being deliberately swept under the rug. But it was after LaVell Edwards left that a lot of stuff started to come out. And I mean, even now, they recently had this thing with that receiver, Parker Kingston, who I think was sitting in a jail cell for a while for, sexual assault and stuff. I mean, it's awful, just awful stuff, and anyway.
New Mexico State, they're down the street from me. And oh my God, their basketball team.
Oh yes, I've heard about this.
Gangsters. I mean, holy crap! It literally sounds like one of those '90s gangster films. Like when they're reading about these guys and the stuff they've done and gotten away with, and then the coach covering up for them.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So, but what about basketball at BYU? I know they have was it good when you were there?
It was all right. I remember going to games. I only did this my freshman year. I had the sports pass, so I went to all the football games, basketball games. I even went to softball games and stuff like that, just so I got my money's worth. But I remember the basketball team that year was pretty good. That they didn't go that far. The year that they were good, this is long after I left, when they had Jimmer Fredette. This is 2012, I want to say. So yeah, but that's long after my time. I know I remember when I was there, so I went on a mission for the church. And I was in the missionary training center, talking with all these other guys from wherever. And there was this kid that we used to play basketball with who was just like me. He went to Germany, but he was he must have been 6'9" or something. So you're going to guard him. He was huge. But we would talk to him afterwards and say, dude, you got to try out for the team, because he would get in trouble there. You know, we would play in the gym that they had for the prospective missionaries and stuff. He would get in trouble for dunking, you know, because they had a no dunking rule, you know. And so we talked to them afterwards, like, you got to try out for the BYU team. And so he did. But he didn't have a chance at all because the coach was like the dad of one of the players, and there was all this like nepotism going on and stuff, and the team was no good then. And so that's when I was like, yeah, I'm not going to pay much attention to this, right? They should have had my buddy should have been on the team, you know. So
yeah.
Anyway,
I got to meet Sean Bradley on.
Wow.
Yeah. right before, sadly, he was paralyzed in that accident on the bike.
Yeah.
God, dude. His hand, I'm 6 foot. I've been 6 foot since the 8th grade, so I was a pretty big 15-year-old, I guess.
Yeah.
But dude, his hand could have swallowed my whole head.
Yeah, I was gonna say Sean Bradley. You would never forget meeting him. He's like 6'7" or 7'7". I would say 7'8", something like that.
7'6", something like that. Yeah, dude. At one point, I remember because we were on a cruise ship, and me and my family were sitting there like waiting for a magic show to happen, and we see him walk through. And this poor dude, he like gets up to walk back out for something, and he hits his head on the exit sign. And I'm like, God, I could not imagine like being that huge that everywhere you go is a problem.
Well, I got in trouble the other day in one of my gameplay videos going through NBA Jam for making fun of Sean Bradley, but people let me have it in the comment section about, no, he was a better player than that, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I'll be careful with what I say.
You were probably all right on the money with your evaluation when you talk about his NBA career. No offense, Sean Bradley, but come on now. That dude was getting dunked on by everyone. And
yeah, exactly.
At 7'6", you can't be allowing that, man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's anyway, yeah, it's but yeah, so Sean Bradley was a little bit controversial at BYU. So he went to BYU for a year and was like the conference player of the year or something like that. And then he goes on a mission to Australia. And then before it's over, he declares for the NBA draft instead of going back to college for another year. That was really controversial because, you know, the promise had been that he would go back, and then he decided not to at the last second and took the money instead. So I don't know if it would have helped him or not to stay another year in college, but, you know, who knows?
I don't think it would have made any difference.
Probably wouldn't have, yeah.
I don't think so. I just don't think the dude had the killer instinct for the NBA. You know, when you're playing a bunch of – you know, let's be honest. When you're playing against a bunch of white boys in Utah that don't get taller than 6 foot, maybe, you're gonna have an easy time. But then when you're against all the dudes from around the world and they're
that's different
size, I mean, he wasn't in the best. I get Utah's a basketball country, but I can't name too many NBA players that came out of Utah.
No, I can't either. Honestly, I can't think of very many. So yeah, it's anyway, yeah, it's one of those things. And I've always thought that his problem, I think I said this in the video, is that he never really like put on muscle and meat and stuff. Like you were talking about Shaq. That was the thing about Shaq. I mean, coming straight out of LSU, Shaq was like a beast, right? Yeah. And I was watching, so I have a copy of the 93 NBA All-Star game here on my computer. I was watching, which if you get a chance, it's awesome. You got to watch it. But they have this thing, NBC did this thing at the beginning where they were interviewing Shaq because it was his rookie year, and they're talking with him about, you know, he had a military father, if I remember right, and stuff like that. And
that's why he's in San Antonio.
Yeah, and that's the reason why he was so big and so powerful, because he had that in his head, like right from the beginning. You know, I'm going to condition myself and get myself big and strong and all this stuff. You know. And anyway,
so with David Robinson.
Yeah, David Robinson, another great example. Anyway, I'm a huge fan of Shaq, to be honest with you, especially the work that he did with TNT. You know, doing NBA commentary and stuff. I think or TBS, whichever one it was. I think he's really underrated. You know. No,
NBA on TNT, which they're I think on ESPN now, but that is actually now. That's probably the last great broadcast booth left.
Yeah.
I don't know. I grew up with it. I love NFL on Fox, man. I do. Mm-hmm. I love seeing Terry Bradshaw go out there with his scrambled brain trying to talk.
I actually have to agree with you. I really do like it. So if you watch if you watch older NFL content, you'll see it's kind of the opposite with what happened with baseball. I do think that once Fox got the NFL and they put in, like the 10-yard marker and all that other stuff, I think that it really changed the way that you watch, and I think they did a really good job with it. But yeah, I know Terry Bradshaw became like a national icon and stuff, with his commentary and stuff. It's really good,
Howie Long, shoot.
Long, yeah.
That dude didn't. Yeah, he's a Hall of Famer, but his football career wasn't really memorable. But now everyone knows who he is because of NFL on Fox.
Exactly.
What did you think of John Madden as a commentator? Because I want to hear what you have to say first, then I'll say what I've thought watching old games that he broadcasted.
So Madden is a really, really interesting guy. I know that Madden's big thing is sort of like, here's a big hit here, boom, boom, and all that stuff. I don't know. I think it's good in the sense that, it can kind of get people sort of interested. Whether it's actually helpful in helping you understand the sport or not is another question. I was just playing earlier today, Madden 64 on the N64 here on my computer, and I'm listening to this commentary and like so I make a mistake or whatever, and Madden's like, oh, the defense was all over that play, and I'm like, well, yeah, duh, we lost 5 yards, like, thanks, John.
That's what I was gonna say, when you can say some really dumb obvious things where like even the most average person that doesn't know anything about football didn't need to hear that. But I do appreciate him. Like, I saw this the other day on, I think, Instagram, and it was a video of him when Ricky Williams was the running back for the Dolphins. And it was cool because he's explaining the A gaps, the B gaps, and C gaps, and how a running back looks to him before he decides where he's going to run. And he used Madden, actually, like a clip from Madden to demonstrate it in between, like the players in the huddle and all that. And then the very next play, Ricky Williams runs through the A gap, and that was cool to see him showing that. And it's it's funny, like moments like the Seahawks when he caught him having hot dogs on the sideline.
Yeah.
But yeah, as a kid who grew up, I never watched him broadcast a game live, but I heard from my cousins, my dad, all the adults in my life, like, oh, this is an amazing football mind, and then to finally watch him, I was a little disappointed. I don't know if I'd ever consider him amazing, but the thing that Madden did, and this will actually be another interesting video, the thing he did that really helped was he took a lot of football away from kind of like the jargon and started to turn it into stuff that people like could understand. I think he did a lot of that, really deliberately. So if you ever watch just like random games from like the 70s and you listen not to what the play-by-play guy's saying, but what the other guy's saying, you'll notice that there's all sorts of jargon out there about, well, he's running this pattern or that pattern or whatever. And you're watching, you're like, what? I didn't even see what happened in the play, So that's where I think that he had a lot of sort of value added. I think that for Madden too, he was fortunate that he worked with Pat Summerall for so long. Pat Summerall, is an amazing broadcaster, and he was the brains, really.
Yes, exactly, and was very, very good at it. So yeah, that was really, I think, the height of football broadcasting. Though you have a lot of guys these days, I think, who are pretty good too. It's
Have you ever read Casey Joyner?
No.
You should check him out. I forget the name of his books, but he's kind of like, I guess, the Bill James of football is what you would classify him as.
Yeah, and I see here. Yeah, with The Athletic, the football scientist is what's coming up.
See what books he has. There was a book. I forget what the name of that book's called, but that book is what kind of broke it down for me, like how you were just saying. And I think he's a dude. I'm honestly surprised that I don't see his name a lot more in the sports analytics history community.
Yeah.
I'm honestly shocked you didn't know who he was, but I've never read Bill James. So I wanted to ask, like, is it really worth my time? Because I hear like a lot of mixed things about him, even from Saber people themselves.
Yeah, my favorite thing on my blog is to take something that Bill James said and then like show that he was wrong, just because it helps with the SEO, the algorithm or whatever,
Yeah.
I do think that Bill James is worth it, but what you have to remember is that Bill James, I think he was an English major. He's like a writer first and foremost. some of the reasons why people will rip him apart is because he came to baseball with this mindset of like, batting average is important, pitcher wins are important, and stuff. And he, like, where people were starting to like not pay attention to that stuff and pay attention to more modern stats and stuff for various reasons, he never really was doing a lot of that. There is stuff, though, that he writes that's really good. And a lot of the things that's really good about Bill James is how he will conceptually like frame a problem, so that's kind of the thing you want to pay attention to. If you come into this and you think, I'm going to learn like what his logic is, what his thought process is and stuff, that's where Bill James, I think, is the best. But if you're just like going to be like, oh, I want to just figure out like the formulas and stuff, it'll be kind of disappointing. It's probably better in that case just to go to like Fangraphs and do what the other sort of geeks do. The other thing about Bill James is his research on the Hall of Fame is like absolutely top notch. I did a quick video a couple months ago on the Hall of Fame, and I used his book sort of as like the basic like outline of what I wanted to say and how I wanted to approach it. But his understanding of the Hall of Fame and why it is the way it is in baseball and why there's always controversy and stuff is really, really good. Like the research he did was good. Yeah. So yeah, it's sometimes hit and miss. But yeah, I have a full down here somewhere. I have a full collection of the Bill James abstracts, so I need to go through and read them all again. But yeah, I've read a lot of James.
So, talking about the Hall of Fame real quick, I think you said it's not something you pay too much attention to, right? The Hall of Fame.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. I always have to look up to find out who's in and who's not because I forget.
Did you what did you have any opinions on this most recent class? With Carlos Beltran and Jeff Kent and Andruw Jones?
Yeah. For those three, actually, I don't have any sort of criticism of them. I could see, all three of them, getting in. I think that the biggest concerns that people have more are players who've been skipped over because of the steroids, stench and all that other stuff. But yeah, for the most recent class, I don't really have that many concerns. And even when it comes to, if you look, especially on Twitter, you see a lot of people complaining about like, why is Harold Baines in the Hall of Fame? And
I'll be honest, I don't have a problem with Harold Baines being in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I don't either. I think
his stats, his county stats justify it.
Yeah, I agree.
People will say he played forever and he never was top. He was only 1 year top 10 in a stat. Okay. But you still have to be of a certain level to play that long and be able to put up those stats over that time.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about Andruw Jones as a Hall of Famer. I guess I'm not really upset about it, but where I have the problem is why the hell is it Kenny Lofton in?
Yeah.
And also it kind of brings it to my mind, okay, well, is Jim Edmonds a Hall of Famer? Like, yeah. There's an argument now to be made for Jim Edmonds now, and I would have never made that argument in the past.
And this is the thing that that always kind of happens with the Hall of Fame, especially when you like go back and back and back. There's a whole bunch of guys that got knocked in because of the Veterans Committee in the 70s that probably don't belong. And then you always get into, well, if this guy's in, how come this guy's not in, and so on and so on. And people make a big deal out of it because people who are fans of certain players will start like letter writing campaigns, or they'll start campaigning like they're politicians or whatever to try to get them recognition and stuff. So yeah, it's going to be like that probably forever in the Hall of Fame. My only complaint about Andruw Jones is I remember watching him. I went to a couple of games live where the Braves played. It must have been part of, so I did a trip back in 2001 with my dad. We went across the country from Salt Lake all the way to New York and then back just watching games. It was great.
That's cool.
But I can remember seeing Andruw Jones play, and like you didn't always see this on TV, but you could tell that like, maybe he was like conserving himself or whatever, but like it looked like, he was kind of jogging most of the time out there and stuff. It feels not fair. You're like, this guy has so much athletic, ability, but he looks like he's like falling asleep when he's playing the game, so anyway.
Yeah, and then he just kind of, I know he was a center fielder and they fall off pretty hard, but he fell off hard.
Yeah.
And again, that just, in my mind, brings like that. Okay, well, now there's an argument for Jim Edmonds. Now there's an argument for more center fielders. And I will say, like, one interesting thought I had, and it's the same class that Baines was in. People were so mad that Harold Baines made it, and I wasn't necessarily mad that Lee Smith made it. I do think Lee Smith is worthy, but again, it opens up that conversation where, okay, basically the whole argument for Lee Smith at that time was he was at one point the all-time saves leader.
Yeah.
Okay, well then does Jeff Reardon make it in?
Right.
You know,
Right.
like, and I don't think Jeff Reardon's a Hall of Famer. I just don't. But at the same time, Raleigh Fingers played during that time, and he made it in. And
Yeah.
so it's always interesting. And I mean, we could talk forever about it. But
Yeah,
I guess
well,
I do love the Hall of Fame. I think that is my favorite part of the game, is debating those things with people,
yeah.
especially people who are well informed. Now, I know you don't have the biggest issue with steroids, right? So let me ask you this, because I don't like them. I am
Yeah.
against the use of them in the sport. But I will say, I guess one place where I've matured lately is that I can agree that people like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens should probably be let in, because at that time it wasn't against the rules per se. It was just kind of being swept under the rug by the owners and Bud Selig, which Bud Selig's in the Hall of Fame. And
Yeah, that's the big problem.
that's the big problem there. But what's happened for me recently that bugs me is, and I'm sure you'll have an opinion on this, and I'm curious to hear what your opinion is. Pete Rose was just reinstated.
Yeah.
And my dad was a diehard Cincinnati Reds fan, but I was raised to hate Pete Rose because he gambled on baseball.
Yeah.
And also because, like my dad said, he thought he was just God's gift to the earth, and he was far from that. So I do think Pete Rose is fixing to be put into the Hall of Fame. I think that's what the move was made for, and to get that crowd, the boomer crowd, more interested in baseball again, since they aren't right now. And because that's probably going to happen, I mean, I do think at this point, just let Barry Bonds in, let Roger Clemens in, because they weren't breaking the rules. I'm sure they knew what they were doing was wrong, but no one was saying anything, and so many guys were doing it. Whereas what Pete Rose was doing, every single freaking locker room he went into, and I've been into an MLB locker room 2 years ago. I was in the Rockies locker room. They still have the signs up. If you bet on baseball, you will be banned.
Exactly.
Now he's back in there. What precedent does that set?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There are big questions about that. I'll say that. So the thing that people don't say so much about steroids. So back in it was about 20 years ago, I used to be really a big poster over on a Baseball Think Factory, which is no longer around, but it's where a bunch of baseball geeks would just get together, and it was sort of like, in the beginning, it was actually sort of like 4chan for baseball geeks. Then they forced registration, so it was a little bit less crazy, but we would talk about this a lot back then, and my opinion started to shift a little bit, because people would remind me that when it comes to steroids, you had this thing where both pitchers and batters were using it. So, like, while you can say, oh, Bonds roided up, that's how he's hitting all these home runs, he's also hitting against guys who are throwing like crazy fastballs, because they're also on steroids, right? I mean, there's a lot of this sort of back and forth. And then when you look at people who we know use steroids, some of them are stars, but a lot of them are real marginal players who were trying to get an edge, and it didn't work. That's the thing that's interesting about it. For a lot of these guys, it didn't work that well. So I don't know. I think that there is an argument one way or the other. At the same time, it is pretty obvious that, like, the Barry Bonds, growth trajectory was not normal and not natural. It's not that hard to see that. Anyway, Bonds is another interesting person. You talk about people who would get maligned. I mean, he was not friendly with the media at all, and he's a real sort of controversial figure because of that. So I don't know. I think it's hard to figure out what most people think about him, but I do think eventually he'll get in.
I've talked to guys who didn't play with Bonds but were around Bonds. Actually, I've talked to one guy that did play with Bonds, and every single one of them has. I'll just say one of them called him a psychopath, and I've never heard anything nice about the guy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. But then again, just like you were saying, that you talk about Pete Rose. Pete Rose, in his own way, I think also was a little bit psychotic, and
he was. He was. I just don't like the guy. His whole persona, like, people cuss Ty Cobb, and I get it, but I think Ty Cobb was more of a product of his times, and also a product of where he grew up. And I think the guy gets a bad rap because of the Al Stump book.
Yeah. Yes.
But like I was listening to a podcast earlier today, and they were calling Ty Cobb the Pete Rose of his era, and okay, maybe playing wise, he had the hustle, and he wasn't gonna be scared of anyone on that field, but personality wise, no,
Yeah, he wasn't.
Pete
He
Rose was
wasn't.
a douche.
Yeah, exactly. No, Cobb was, from what I can understand, he was a lot easier for people to get along with, and he just had it really rough because he came up, from the glory of their times. He came up in the era where, older players would like beat up on the younger guys because they didn't want them stealing their jobs, and I mean, it was really rough back then.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing that I've always found fascinating is just a lot of people are quick to write him off as a racist because of stories that were falsely reported.
Exactly.
But then right before the guy passed away, I think in his last interview, he said the one person he'd pay to watch play was Willie Mays.
Yes, that's right. You're right.
Yeah.
I remember this. Yeah.
And so I've always had a soft spot for Ty Cobb because of that. I don't like that he's so maligned.
The great irony is that the real racists in the sport at that time were people like Kennesaw Mountain Landis, the commissioner of baseball, or even J.G. Taylor Spink, the guy who was running the Sporting News, who's a person who I've always been fascinated with. But he's a total racist and douchebag. I mean, just an awful person, and but nobody says that,
Yeah. And a lot of those guys had a huge influence on how the history of the game was told. Actually, I think Spink, he wrote Babe Ruth's journal entries, or for whatever that was in the paper.
Yep.
And like that, those kinds of things bother me a lot. Like you have that video about Cap Anson, and that's another thing. People bring up the character clause, and if the character clause is worth anything, why is Cap Anson in the Hall of Fame?
Exactly.
I understand maybe people have a thing against retroactively taking people out. That's a big thing against with O.J. Simpson still being in the Hall of Fame. But if the character clause means anything, why is that guy there? Why is Gaylord Perry in the Hall of Fame when that guy explicitly admitted that he cheated every time he pitched? It's just there's so much to get into with that topic that I'm sad I brought it up because I could talk about it all night.
Have you ever read Gaylord Perry's book Me and the Spitter? That's a great book.
I haven't. I want to. I've heard it's hard to find. Is that true?
I don't know. I had a copy. I think I sold it in the end. I had a paper copy for a while. I don't remember where I got it. I must have got it from a library sale or something like that. But anyway, it's an interesting book though to read when he goes into this. But my understanding is he started loading up because he was losing his fastball, and he hurt his arm at some point in time, and so he had to. That's how he stayed in the game.
I do know. It's funny. He taught his 4-year-old daughter at the time, in case anyone ever asked her if her daddy threw the spitter, she would answer, "It's a mean slider."
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But he was the master at it, right? Because he would, if you watch the clips, he's like touching here and touching there, and actually, like the stuff is like someplace he's not touching at all.
Yeah.
So psychological
is what it is. Yeah. And I dig that. I do think those things, they shouldn't be, I guess, what's the word? They shouldn't be encouraged, but they also shouldn't be so ruled out of the game.
Right.
Hell, I mean, I don't think guys should be hitting dudes in the head with their pitches, but hell, I want to see baseball like it used to be, where, all right, next guy up, we're going to hit his ass because he got our dude last time. I miss that with baseball. And, I do think that is something we're missing more and more, is the psychological part of the game. And I don't know if that's because the management's gone soft, the players aren't as smart as they used to be. I would say that those are the problems in baseball today. We were talking about the pitch clock. Whenever the pitch clock was first coming up, I was worried about all those rule changes. And I do think the bags should be back to the size they were before. I don't like the ghost runners rule. But the pitch clock rule, I'm fine with it. I don't think it, I've heard some guys complain that it's bad for the hitters because the hitters can't adjust. But come on, how much time do you really need to, what are we going to do? Nomar Garcia Parra every time and adjust your freaking glove.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Nobody wants to see that. That's where the game would become unwatchable. Yeah, no, you gotta. So I was writing a thing about what was it? I wrote it was actually today. It came out a blog post about this guy from the 19 teens. Brago Roth is his name, who played at the time for the Indians. And there was this game where he stole 4 bases. I got into this. He stole home 6 times in 1917 that tied a major league record. And so I was looking this up, trying to figure out the last time he did it. But it's funny, this newspaper article about this game is like, this game took forever. There were 8 pitchers and it took like 3 hours, 10 minutes. And I'm thinking it took only 3 hours, 10 minutes. But back in 1917, they were like, oh, that was a marathon game. It was so long and stuff like that. But anyway, it was a lot different back then. But yeah, Brago Roth is interesting in this game. So where he still steals home, the bases were loaded and there was nobody out. And they just took off on this pitcher. This Senator or Washington Senators pitcher had no idea. You know, he was like holding onto the ball, wasn't paying attention. So the runners just went and triple steal. You don't see that anymore.
No. So what is your full opinion on things like advanced analytics?
So I'll tell you this way, like I went for a little while. I was on Twitter, sort of like making fun of people who were into this stuff. I do like advanced analytics to a certain extent. My worry about it is that a lot of the times, instead of using it to like describe what's happening in the game, we're using it to tell us what the strategy should be. And the reason why I'm concerned about that is because that's where we get this game where it's nothing but home runs and nobody's moving, nobody's running, just home runs.
The pitchers getting taken out before the 5th inning.
Exactly, pitchers get taken out early and stuff. That's kind of, in my mind, what's kind of screwing up the sport. I do think though that it is useful to an extent when we're trying to like look at players and talk about them and stuff. I just think of it as like another tool in the toolbox. But at least for me, I've always longed for the days when pitchers could still throw complete games and when guys would like steal bases and it wasn't just a sort of stand around type game. And I hope that one day it comes back to that, but I don't know about the pitchers part. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I don't know.
I think honestly the pitchers have the best chance of getting back to what they used to be. Maybe not in terms of like doing complete games and all that again, but like with dudes I've talked to that used to pitch, they always say that today they're throwers. They're not pitchers. They're throwing as hard as they can and not actually trying to pitch. And I think more and more pitchers these days are figuring that out. That hey, if I'm throwing as hard as I can all the time, they're gonna figure that out real quick. Because I've told people before, like little kids playing the game, they're worried about how fast the pitchers are throwing it. Well, I tell them, do you think Derek Jeter cared about how fast they're throwing it? Do you think no, they don't. They don't care. They just hit it.
Yeah.
And so that's what the hitters are going to do. They're going to figure you out eventually. So I think pitchers eventually will have to figure out how to work it, how to actually work a batter. I think the emphasis on speed is what's really killing them, the emphasis on velocity, because, I mean, shoot, we had guys back in the day like Mark Eichhorn who was throwing 62 miles per hour, yet no one could hit him.
Yeah, exactly.
I think those guys will figure that out, and that will kind of even itself out. What I'm more concerned about is the hitters.
Yeah.
Because this whole emphasis on launch angle, it is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, I forget what the angle is, but I know I've looked at it, and like the best launch angle in recent years is a line drive. And so if that's just hitting the ball hard. You don't need to know what your launch angle is to hit the ball hard, but hitters are so invested in that you see little kids talking about it these days, and that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
that's where I'm concerned.
Have you talked with Jeff Fry already? I know he's all over Twitter. Yeah.
Oh, I haven't sat down with him yet, but we've texted. Yes.
Yeah, he's the one to talk to about this. I love his stuff. I read him all the time, but I agree 100%. So when it comes to pitchers, my favorite story about this is back in 2011. I went on the spur of the moment to this Nationals game. It was on a Sunday against the Marlins, I think it was, and Livan Hernandez was pitching. And so I remember when Hernandez was in like 97, when he was really big and like everyone was talking about this guy. Or was it that? Yeah, it was that year because Dontrell Willis
the Marlins won,
when the Marlins won, Anyway, so I'm going to watch this game, right? I didn't realize what he was pitching like. He had no fastball left, so he was doing nothing but junk, just off speed, off speed, off speed, and nobody could hit him. I'm sitting there. I was about probably like 15 rows up, sitting next to a bunch of old guys, and these guys are like, I could go over there and hit that. That's not that fast, but it's the movement, and it was the, the placement. And I mean, he had these hitters just like mowed down one after the other. Pitchers eventually, I think, will realize that, but if you go back and read like some of the real old books about pitching, like you read Pitching in a Pinch by Christy Mathewson, he talks about, the key to pitching is knowing when to like use your fastball and use your strength, and then knowing when you don't have to, and knowing how to get guys out without like overpowering them and stuff. And people have forgotten about that, but that used to be a big part of the sport back in the good old days.
Yeah, seeing that goes back to like the mental part of the game. Like I know Greg Maddux, I forget who the batter was, but he tells a story about he was already ahead in the game and there was a guy up. So what he was going to do was just give him a ball to literally groove in that situation so that he could hit a home run, because he felt that later on in that season there would be an important game that they would be playing against this team, and he'd come up against that guy and he wanted to get him later on. And sure enough, later on he got him. Or like going back to Ty Cobb, like a lot of people, I know it's been pointed out that he's committed the most errors of any American League outfielder ever. But what's interesting is, like, if you read what Ty Cobb says after his career was over, he would commit errors on purpose or make base running blunders, like look stupid on purpose to see how the other teams would react or what they would do in that situation. And he'd remember it for later. And I just feel like, you don't have guys doing that these days.
Yeah. Well, I think you see that in a lot of other sports too. And I have to go back and watch a bunch, but I'm pretty sure if you watch a bunch of games of like Bill Russell, where he was doing commentary for basketball, you'll hear him talk about stuff like that, and I mean, maybe you can go block every shot, but maybe you want to let the guy make shots, at this time or that time. And then later on, you know what he's going to try to do, something like that. So I do think there's a big mental part of it that people forget. And the other thing, you may have read it already, if you read the Thinking Man's Guide to Baseball, I think is what it's called, by Leonard Kopka, I think is his name. He talks a lot about, things that in the game we don't think about, like fear, right? The whole thing about baseball is you're scared because you have like a ball coming at you and it's so fast you can barely see it, right? And so there's a lot of that stuff as well that I think people forget about. It's not just your velocity and then your the spin you have on the ball, the spin rate or whatever. There's a lot more to it than just that, but you can't tell that to kids these days, right? The Twitter kids, they don't want to listen to that. So
no, it's annoying. Well, let's see, what time is it? 7:37. I kept you for a good minute, so I'll let you go here in just a minute. But one thing I've asked all my guests so far, and I want you to take a minute to think on this question because you've had a lot of cool stories already, and I want to have you back soon because I've already had a lot of fun talking with you now. But I ask all my guests the first time they're on, and like I said, you're my first non-major league guest, so I'll just put it to you like you are a major leaguer.
I was a little league dropout, so.
Well, I ask all of them this question. They've spent their whole careers chasing this dream, working hard to get to where they are, and then they are where they at. Well, they're gonna meet people. They're gonna have events happen to them in the midst of their careers, and there's gonna be a chance probably that they're gonna witness something or meet someone, and that event or that person will make them feel like a little boy again, childlike, full of wonder. Who is one person or one thing that's happened to you in your life in regards to sports that, since you've become an adult or whatever, has made you have that little boy feeling again?
Oh man, boy, that's a good question. Yeah, I'm gonna have to think a little bit about that. I think that there's probably a lot of different things that sort of get me back into, what it was like as a kid. Right now, the thing that does it the most, and this has happened every day, is on my baseball channel. I've been going back. I've been playing Baseball Stars and the NES. I've been doing this long series. It's like 40 something episodes now. That's the thing that really gets me back. Sitting down and playing a game like that, even though it's simple, it's kind of dumb, it's like simple graphics and stuff. That gets me to go back to the way that it was when I was a kid. And I feel the same way that I did, back when I was, whatever, like 10 years old playing this game and screwing around and stuff like that. So right now, that's probably my answer. That might change over time as I sit down and think about it, but for me right now, every time I can sit down and I can play something like that, I feel like, I'm kind of going back, and it feels fun and exciting again, even though it's basically the same game over and over.
Well, talk about the games real quick that you play. I was real happy to see your video on NBA Street.
Oh yeah, I should get back.
Volume 2, yeah, Volume 2.
Volume 2, yeah.
That's my favorite basketball game ever. So to see you give the compliments towards that you did, I was real happy. I do notice though that you don't play much modern games like on the modern consoles like PlayStation and all that. Did you ever play those games? Like I grew up playing All-Star Baseball on the Xbox.
Yeah, so no, I didn't have an Xbox. That's the reason why. My parents, when I was in college, they got a PlayStation 2. That's how I got NBA Street Volume 2. And I remember I beat that game over like the winter break or something sometime, and I was obsessed with that for a little while. We do have, I think we still have it sitting around. We have a PlayStation 3 somewhere or other. And most of the stuff I do, I'm just emulating it. So, if it's too modern for the most part, I can't do much with it. I do need to get into some more modern stuff, though. People keep telling me to play like Super Mega Baseball and stuff like that. And so I need to sort of get around to that and get into it a little bit. But for me, though, a lot of it really is just about sort of reliving the stuff that I remember playing when I was a kid. And the truth is that for me, I went away from video games probably around when I was 13 or 14. I started to get into my friends and I would play like Magic the Gathering instead. This would have been like the late 90s, and then after that, I got really into girls. So, you know how that goes, and anyway, but now that I'm married, we have kids and stuff, it's time to settle back down, play some video games again, see what I missed.
Hell yeah. Well, I'm in that same ballpark with you too, so it's a good ballpark to be in. That's
sure. Right. But yeah, NBA Street Volume 2, we got to get back on that. That's a great game. It's just so much fun to play that game, man. It's just, I love it. I love that game so much. It's so well done.
Yeah. Well, man, it's been real nice talking to you. And like I said, I hope to have you back on soon.
Yeah.
But before I go, please tell everyone all like your channels, where they can find you, all that, because I want to get your channel out there more, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the main one I suppose is the Baseball Replay Journal. If you do a search on YouTube for Baseball Replay Journal, you'll find it. I also have a Substack. So if you go on Google and search for it, it'll pop up somewhere or other. I've got a bunch of other ones. So I have one for the Football Manager game. It's a soccer related channel, so you can check that out. I've got one called Action Football Sundays. It's for football stuff, American football. So that's fun. Basketball one's called Basketball in Context. And I have a hockey one called Hockey in Context. It's a real creative name. But anyway, that one's also pretty small but growing and is a lot of fun. And what am I missing? Probably missing.
I'm messing it up.
I've got
the Sino one.
The Sino one, yes, the Chinese one. Yeah, if you do a search on YouTube for Dream of the Red Chamber, it might come up. It might not. You can also check out redchamber.blog. That's where the blog part is. So yeah, you can check that stuff out as well. So anyway, my Grateful Dead one. Yeah, if you search up Pirouette and Red, that's sort of like my kind of podcast thing. I don't know. I'm kind of making that up as I go. So I don't know. We'll see whatever happens with that. So there's all sorts of little projects and stuff you can find. And I'm on Twitter. I don't even know what my Twitter handle is. So you guys can do a search for me and find me somewhere on there.
Well, thank you for coming on, man. And hope you have a good rest of your night. But God bless and everything.
Yeah, have a great evening. Great talking with you.